What happens when a country music superstar sits down for what should be a routine interview only to find herself facing questions that cross every professional line imaginable? What starts as a simple promotional chat quickly spirals into the most uncomfortable 12 minutes ever captured on camera, culminating in one of the most dramatic walk-offs in entertainment history. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. And drop a comment below letting me know what you think about celebrity interviews that go too far. Now, let's get into what really happened behind the scenes. The Nashville studio was buzzing with its usual pre-interview energy. Carrie Underwood arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, dressed in a crisp white blazer paired with dark jeans. Her signature blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her posture carried the calm confidence of someone who had spent years in the public eye. She greeted the staff warmly before settling into the plush burgundy chair across from Bryan White, a veteran radio host with decades of country music journalism behind him. The lights were soft, the cameras steady, and nothing suggested the storm that was about to unfold. "Carrie, welcome back to the show," Bryan said with his trademark smile, leaning forward slightly. "It's been, what, 3 years since we last sat down together?" "Something like that," Carrie replied easily, crossing her legs and adjusting her blazer. Time flies when you're always on the road. The opening minutes flowed smoothly. They talked about her latest album, upcoming tour dates, and the challenges of balancing music with family life. Carrie spoke thoughtfully about her creative process, about how vulnerability in songwriting allowed her to connect with fans on a deeper level. Her answers were polished yet sincere, the kind she had delivered hundreds of times before. Bryan nodded along, flipping through his notes. "Fans are really connecting with the emotional honesty in your new songs, especially the one about forgiveness. That clearly comes from a personal place." Carrie smiled and nodded. Music, she explained, had always been her way of processing life. Being in the spotlight taught her lessons about people, about herself, and sometimes the healthiest thing to do was turn those lessons into lyrics. That was when the tone shifted. "Speaking of things you've learned about people," Bryan said casually, almost too casually, "there have been some interesting rumors circulating in Nashville about your relationship with your management team." Carrie's posture stiffened, just slightly. Her smile stayed, but something behind her eyes changed. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "What kind of rumors?" Bryan leaned back, sensing an opening. He mentioned whispers of tension, claims that she'd become difficult to work with as her success grew. The studio fell quiet. Even the hum of the cameras seemed louder now. Carrie inhaled slowly, professionalism still intact. "Bryan, I'm not sure where you're getting this information. My team and I have worked together for years, and our success speaks for itself." But Bryan didn't back off. He pressed harder, hinting at anonymous sources, fired assistants, and alleged conflicts. With each question, the atmosphere grew heavier. The distance between interviewer and guest, shrinking into something far more confrontational. By the time Carrie leaned forward and suggested they stick to discussing her music, it was clear this interview had crossed into dangerous territory, and it was only just beginning. Bryan chuckled, but there was a calculated edge beneath it. "Come on, Carrie. Your fans want to know the real you, not just the polished version. They want to know what it's really like to work with someone at your level." "The real me treats people with respect," Carrie replied, her jaw tightening. "And I expect the same in return. That's why I'm confused about where this is going." Bryan raised his hands in a gesture of innocence. He said he was simply asking what people were already wondering about. Then he mentioned stories from unnamed industry insiders, producers who allegedly described tantrums during recording sessions when things didn't go her way. That was the moment Carrie's composure visibly cracked. Her grip tightened on the arms of the chair, and her eyes flashed. "Tantrums?" she asked sharply. "Are you serious right now?" "These are industry professionals," Bryan said, leaning back. "People with decades of experience. They're not making this up. Industry professionals who won't put their names on these stories." Carrie shot back. "How convenient. For them, and for you. You're asking me about anonymous gossip and calling it journalism." Bryan seemed to enjoy the tension. "So you're denying you've had heated disagreements with people you work with?" "What I'm denying is your framing," Carrie said, her voice rising just slightly. "Creative disagreements aren't tantrums. Do you think music gets made by everyone sitting around agreeing all the time?" There's a difference between strong opinions and being difficult, Bryan countered. Carrie paused, studying him. Let me ask you something. In your career, have you ever pushed back against a decision you didn't agree with? Of course, Bryan said, hesitating. Then why is it different when I do it? Carrie asked. When a man fights for his artistic vision, he's passionate. When a woman does it, she's difficult. Bryan's smile faltered before returning, thinner now. He insisted gender had nothing to do with it, that he asked tough questions of everyone. Tough questions about work, Carrie replied. Or tough questions designed to create drama. The tension in the studio was unmistakable. Her publicist edged closer, watching carefully. Bryan tried to regain control, suggesting Carrie was overreacting and that if the rumors weren't true, she could simply deny them and move on. Overreacting, Carrie repeated slowly. There's another word women hear. A lot when we don't quietly accept whatever's being said about us. Bryan stumbled, insisting he hadn't meant it that way. Carrie didn't let it go. From her perspective, he'd come in with a narrative already written, and when she refused to play along, she became the problem. As Bryan shuffled his notes, searching for firmer ground, Carrie's confidence grew. She spoke about professionalism, showing up prepared, working hard, treating people with respect, and speaking up when something wasn't working. To her, that wasn't being difficult. That was doing the job right. But Bryan pushed again, asking how she handled people who didn't meet her standards. The same way you do, Carrie replied. You push for better. You ask for more. The comparison landed harder than Bryan expected, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of his next move. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the interview teetering on the edge of something much bigger. Bryan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The comparison had struck a nerve, and for a moment, the confident host looked unsure. Then his expression hardened. The difference, he said finally, is that I'm not getting a reputation for being hard to work with. The studio went still. Carrie stared at him, her expression unreadable. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, almost too calm. I think you're proving my point without realizing it. Bryan shifted in his chair, clearly irritated now. He said she was being dramatic, that this was just an interview, and that she was taking things too personally. The word hung in the air like a spark near gasoline. Dramatic, Carrie repeated. Overreacting. Difficult. Do you hear yourself? These are labels that get slapped on women the moment we stop smiling and nodding. Bryan insisted again that gender had nothing to do with it. He claimed he treated all his guests the same way. That his job was to push, to dig, to ask uncomfortable questions. But not like this, Carrie replied. Not built on rumors. Not on unnamed sources. Not on vague insinuations. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. She talked about her career, about showing up early, knowing everyone's name, thanking the crew, and working relentlessly to deliver the best possible performance. She explained that having standards didn't make someone cruel or unkind. It made them serious about their craft. Bryan leaned back, his face flushed, his professional composure slipping. I think you're missing the point, he said. There's a pattern here that suggests you might be losing touch with how to work collaboratively. That was it. Carrie rose slowly from her chair, the movement deliberate, controlled. The room seemed to hold its breath. Let me tell you what I think the real pattern is, she said, her voice steady but razor sharp. I think you've spent so long interviewing artists who are grateful just to be here that you've forgotten how to treat successful people with respect. Bryan tried to interject, but she held up her hand. No, you've had plenty of time to talk. She reminded him she didn't need the interview. Her album was topping the charts. Her tour was sold out. Her fans already knew who she was. She had come as a courtesy, expecting to talk about music, creativity, and connection, not to be ambushed with gossip dressed up as concern. Bryan, now clearly rattled, told her she couldn't just walk away because she didn't like the questions. Can't I? Carrie asked quietly. She made it clear that she had agreed to discuss her work, not to defend her character against anonymous accusations. She asked, again, for specifics. Names. Verifiable incidents. Anything real. Bryan flipped through his notes, grasping for something solid. He brought up an alleged issue with the Nashville Symphony. Vague reports of tension during rehearsals. Carrie's eyes flashed. Be specific, she said. What exactly are you accusing me of? When Bryan mentioned creative disagreements, Carrie explained calmly that yes, she had pushed for changes, and that those changes were later praised publicly by the conductor himself. That wasn't dysfunction. That was collaboration. But some people felt you were demanding, Bryan said weakly. Some people, Carrie repeated. Who? He had no answer. The silence that followed was heavy and final. When Bryan tried one last time to frame it as a pattern of behavior, Carrie stepped closer, her voice calm but unyielding. She told him exactly what he was doing, trying to provoke a reaction, so he could later use it as proof of the narrative he'd already decided on. This isn't journalism, she said. It's sensationalism. Bryan accused her of overreacting again. Carrie shook her head slowly. She pointed out that he never asked male artists these questions, never challenged their professionalism based on rumors, never labeled their perfectionism as a flaw. The truth of it landed hard. With that, Carrie picked up her things. She looked directly at him, her voice steady and unmistakably final. We're done here. She walked off set as the cameras kept rolling, leaving behind a stunned host, a silent studio, and an interview that would be talked about far longer than any promotional segment ever could.